Many observers have found that two workable yardsticks help in discovering how near a community is to despotism: the respect scale and the power scale.
A careful observer can use a respect scale to find how many citizens get an even break. As a community moves towards despotism, respect is restricted to fewer people.
How can you ask such a question? Have you got a textbook?
Yes, ma'am.
Does it say here that our law courts are always just?
Yes, ma'am.
Then how dare you question the fact?
The test of despotic power is that it can disregard the will of the people. It rules without the consent of the governed.
HBR Talk with Hannah Wallen.
A few weeks ago, HBR Talk highlighted a petition and provided our viewers with a link to sign or share it. It was written to request that Parliament in the United Kingdom update the country's laws on sexual violence to make them gender neutral. Currently, UK law only labels a forced sex act rape if the perpetrator penetrates the victim with his penis. This week, the author of that petition received a response. Quote, "All non-consensual sexual activity is dealt with by specific serious offenses, including those that can be committed by a man or a woman. We have no plans to amend the legal definition of rape. Victims of rape and sexual violence show immense courage in coming forward, and they must have confidence that the right support will be there when it is needed. All non-consensual sexual activity is dealt with by specific serious offenses, including those that can be committed by a man or a woman. The sentences available are significant and reflect the seriousness of the offending. Sexual violence against men is treated just as seriously by the law, and forcing a man to have penetrative sex, for example, under Section 4.4 of the Sexual Offenses Act of 2003, carries the same maximum sentence as rape, life in prison. Issues surrounding the definition of rape were considered and consulted on prior to the introduction of the Sexual Offenses Act 2003 and during the passage of that legislation through Parliament. In the consultation, there was a considerable amount of agreement that rape should mean an offense of penile penetration. We therefore have no plans to amend the legal definition of rape in the Sexual Offenses Act of 2003, as suggested by this e-petition. But make it clear that behavior captured under Section 4.4 carries a life sentence, unlike under Section 4.5. The reply goes on to discuss services provided and mentions the fact that there has been a significant rise in the number of men and boys coming forward to report crimes and access support. Strangely, the fact that more men and boys are coming forward doesn't seem to have indicated to the UK government that there is any need to take their perpetrators, when female, as seriously as female victims' male perpetrators are taken. So, let's examine this for a moment. Let's transfer UK government logic to other gender issues topics. Imagine for a moment if we had totally equal pay but separate titles for attorneys, or in the UK, barristers, I think, depending on their sex. Let's say that was decided because historically, law has been written mostly by men, and the practice of arguing and interpreting law in the court system has, until the 20th century, been done pretty much exclusively by men. We can acknowledge that women who do the same job and can charge the same fees, but let's consider, what if the titles attorney and barrister only referred to practitioners with penises? There'd be a separate but equal title for women, of course, practitioners of law. We could do the same for legislators. In the U.S., men could be senators and congressmen, and women could be representatives of their states, and federal representatives of their districts. In the UK, men could be members of parliament, and women could be legislative representatives. The titles would mean the same thing, they just reserved the connection to the historical masculine prestige of these professions for men, while allowing for women to receive all of the same benefits without the titles. How long do you think it would take for the deluge of critical editorial writing by feminists to come cascading down upon any decision-makers who might put that division of titles into practice? How long before cries of sexism and discrimination would ring out across the political arena? How long before women who have never seen the inside of a courtroom in person would gather in the streets for protest marches demanding equal recognition for their careers in the legal profession? But why should they be offended if they are getting 100% of the same benefits as the men, just without the same title? Could it be that maybe the labels for these careers communicate a certain level of prestige that is absent in a more generic title? That perhaps when it comes to labels for people's behavior, separate but equal is just as wrong as it is for people's rights? And if that is the case, and feminists, and probably also women who don't identify as feminist, would be outraged at being denied that prestige, what does that tell you about the, quote, considerable amount of agreement among members of Parliament that the label rape should only apply to offenses committed using a penis? It's clearly not to differentiate based on whether or not a victim can get pregnant, because a man would be considered a rape victim under Section 1 of the law if another man penetrated his mouth or anus with a penis. Since one man cannot get another man pregnant, that is obviously not the reason legislators thought it was important to limit the label to describing crimes committed using a penis. Under the law, both sexes can be labeled rape victims because both sexes can be anally or orally penetrated with a penis, but only men can be perpetrators. So the goal was specifically to exempt women from being labeled rapists. The question is, why such an arbitrary standard? The answer isn't flattering to UK legislators. The label rapist communicates a lot. The polar opposite of prestigious career titles, the label imposes a life-changing stigma. If one had no other clues, all that is needed to understand that is the fact that anyone tagged with it gets treated by society as if they are irredeemable for life. Allegations of rape are expected to be a career killer for any male politician who is unable to discredit his accuser, and are even a threat to the careers of those who can, as even after an allegation is proven false, the stigma of that label sticks to its target. We are admonished by feminists that we should believe women who make such allegations, and that we're misogynistic if our belief is contingent on anything like evidence or even just an absence of credible counter-evidence. It's socially accepted that the commission of a rape is an action that indicates a significant character flaw in the perpetrator, one that creates in the rest of society a sense of outrage and an aversion to the bearer of that stigma, sufficient to elicit gut reactions to accusations, rather than logical responses like benefit of the doubt until the accused is proved guilty. Our society begins losing sight of his humanity the moment that label is thrown at him, regardless of whether or not it actually applies. This is, in part, because the rapist is presumed to have callously, even maliciously inflicted not just physical suffering and harm to the victim, but psychological damage. He is accused of violating a fundamental human right, that of the victim's personal autonomy. Those actions matter. They carry a heavy weight that is immediately communicated to anyone who hears the label associated with any person. Part of the accountability faced by a person labeled rapist is that socially and professionally crippling reputational damage. Who decided that female perpetrators should be uniquely exempt from that accountability, and why? Would that be a group of people who don't think women's actions are as meaningful and impacting as things men do? The reply stated that there was a considerable amount of agreement, but among what group? Who did these legislators consult to be advised that women's actions don't matter as much as men's actions do? After all, if they're really serious about claiming that the labels they use reflect the seriousness of the offense, they can only be saying that when women force unwanted reproductive sex on men, it's less serious than when men do it to anyone. And if feminism is about equality of the sexes, why aren't feminist activists getting on this? Shouldn't they be as outraged about being told women's actions have less impact and less meaning than men's if they've committed a crime, as they would be if they were told that about women's career choices? Is feminism about equality, or isn't it? Join HBR Talk as we discuss the consistent rejection by the UK's legislators in the face of public agitation for gender-neutral laws against sexual violence. What is their objection to equal accountability, and what does this indicate about feminist use of crime statistics to make statements about gender inequality in perpetration? The discussion streams on multiple platforms. You can tune in Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern via the link in the low bar, or find other viewing and listening options for that time or later on badgerfeed.com.